All right, welcome back to the IMNerd podcast, guys. I'm your host, Freeway, and I'm here with my co-host, Kenny.
Acha.
And today we are going to be covering my absolute favorite #1 anime in the entire world, Death Note. This is literally the peak of anime for me, and it's actually crazy because Death Note changed my life. So before I was into Death Note and Code Geass and all of those types of anime, I used to be a guy, especially in my teenage years, that would say, and Kenny probably can recall me saying this when I was younger, but I used to say, I don't like anime if it's not action. Like, if it's not an action anime. So we're not talking about DBZ, Bleach, Naruto, Yu Yu Hakusho, Hunter x Hunter, that type of thing. I was basically on some, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to watch anime of people just living their regular life or doing whatever nonsense if it doesn't involve beams and blast and fighting all the time, right? And then in comes Death Note in my late teenage years, early 20s, because I watched it several times, and I think every time I've watched it, I've gained more respect for it because of just how well it's written and also how much I relate to the characters, mainly Yagami Light. So I'm going to preface this entire podcast by saying I'm a huge Yagami Light fan. I'm also a fan of L, but I'm a really big advocate and fan of Yagami Light, and I would basically be a Mikami if it were real. But
on that note, I know it's usually pretty polarizing. Like, people are like big L fans or big Light fans.
Yes.
I've now read and watched this a lot, and I tend to just like, I'm not necessarily fans of either. Like, I love both characters, but the whole just cat and mouse lock and key aspect of the series is so much more intriguing than the characters themselves, and that, like, at no point was I necessarily rooting for L to win or rooting for Light to win. I was rooting for both of them to win and lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was always so interested in, like, what trap is L going to put Light in and how's Light going to get out of it? You know what I mean?
Yes, like, it's actually brilliant how the cat and mouse in this series is the best I've ever seen it in anything. I have never seen anything like this. Like, it is absurd what the writer accomplished with this an extremely intricate game of cat and mouse. It is so brilliant. And again, just like Game of Thrones, I am often blown away by Death Note. Now, some people I know don't like the ending, so I throw out Game of Thrones there. You guys know I love comparing everything to Game of Thrones, but I know people hate Game of Thrones ending, me included. But I think Death Note's ending is fine. And obviously, we're going to be jumping all around. This is not like a review of Death Note. This is more so just how the IMNerd podcast feels about Death Note and just the things that
talking about it. And if you like Death Note as well, because I don't know, I think I've said this before, right? But at least something that really gets me and why we started the podcast, and I've noticed that most people are like this. Most nerds, people that like talking about, like, it's just fun to talk about this shit and listen to people talk. Like, I like going on YouTube and just listening to people talk about something. Death Note, Dragon Ball Z. Even if they say a bunch of shit that I already know. Like, in terms of DBZ, you'll be hard-pressed for anybody to give me new information. Like, I know almost all the ins and outs of DBZ, all the secrets. I've been following it since I was a child and, like, super into it. However, it's fun to just listen to other people talk about it, right? And that's what this episode of Death Note is. We're not going to be, like, reviewing each episode. We're just going to fan the fuck out about it, talk about really cool shit. And
so real quick, for the people who have never seen Death Note, or maybe you've seen it but it's been a while, because that's common. The anime came out a long time ago, like early 2000s, right, Kenny? So it's been a while, and a lot of people may not have seen it recently, including myself. I actually haven't seen Death Note in at least 2 years, which is pretty long for me. I usually watch it every single year, and I plan to watch it at some point this year. But since we started the podcast, and the podcast is now a year old, I've had less time to just rewatch things that are not going to immediately.
A lot of new things.
Yes, and the things that I tend to watch, I try to make them into content. So, like, I rewatched Game of Thrones seasons 1 and 2, and then that became an episode about just Game of Thrones misplays for those 2 seasons. And I could probably do something similar with Death Note, and maybe Death Note has, the cool thing about it is that it actually has a bunch of spin-off stories and stuff. So there's actually more podcast episodes on Death Note to come, because I actually think that the one shot that came out during the pandemic that had Donald Trump in it was fucking brilliant. You read it, right, Kenny?
Oh, yes.
It was brilliant. I actually said, this writer needs to write more because his pen is insane.
It's the weird sense of the absolute depression I felt after reading that one shot.
Yes.
Was great. Because, like, the one shot was so well written, and it just, like, really
And the
I
art.
don't. It just go the art, the writing, the character, like, and it just like brought me back into the world so hard.
Yeah.
And the way it culminates and ends, like, really ripped me. I was like, man, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. It was just it was so crazy. And this writer is really, really, really good. Like,
I agree. I was going to say, so to recap what happens in Death Note, essentially a bored death god, or Shinigami as they're called, same as in Bleach, a bored death god drops a death note into the human world and writes all the rules in English, right? So basically, he wants to see what will happen if a human has this power. What do they do with it? And it'll entertain him. And a bored, super intellectual teenager, high school student finds it, and he tests it out, and it works. He's fucking blown away. And he does what any millennial would do after seeing that. He goes on a fucking killing spree. So like, he just starts killing.
Wait, I don't know if any millennial would do that.
Listen,
I just don't know if that's correct. I don't know if any millennial would.
I just feel
I'm sure there's a good amount of them, right? Let that fall into the hands of the wrong millennial, and there's a lot of dead politicians. But
I'm the millennial. I am the millennial I'm talking about. So, a millennial finds it and decides to go on an absolute fucking killing spree. But it's criminals, guys. He's not killing random people. He's specifically killing people who are committing crimes. In fact, I think his first kill was on some almost rapist. They were about to like rape some girl or something.
Yeah. It was like he kind of still didn't fully believe it worked, and he was like in a convenience store.
Yeah.
And out the window, he just happened to see it was like a motorcycle gang or whatever, and they were like trying to rape this woman. And I don't remember how he got the person.
Yeah, I was wondering how he got, but whatever the case may be, and again, it was a little foggy, but he ends up killing a criminal, and he kills more criminals, and he goes on a 5-day killing spree, and eventually, a deaf guy shows up in his bedroom. Now, of course, this spooks the fuck out of him. He literally falls out of his chair. Can't believe that deaf gods exist. And I was thinking if I was in that position, I would probably be scared out of my mind too. But the first thing that came to my mind was like, holy shit, you're black too.
Oh no.
Like that.
Yo, okay, real quick. This is so fucked up. I'm not going to say the person's name, but in high school,
oh no,
there was a kid, and
oh no,
we all called him Ryuk. When I tell you, he looked exactly like Ryuk.
Spoiler alert, Ryuk is ugly as fuck. So whoever this guy is, black, white, yellow, or green, he's ugly as fuck is what they're saying.
He looked exactly like Ryuk. It was fucking crazy.
Yeah, Ryuk is terrifying, but he gives Light the law of the land immediately. The person who uses this book cannot go to heaven or hell. And when you do die, it will be me who writes your name in the death note. Those are like the things he tells him from the gate. Light, who's super intelligent and also probably leans more towards science than religion, is immediately like, I don't really care about the whole heaven or hell thing because they don't really exist. And Ryuk kind of confirms that there is really no heaven or hell. Everyone who dies goes to Mu, which is nothingness. There's just nothing after death. In that universe, right? You can have your own beliefs in real life, but in the Death Note universe, humans, good or bad, no matter what you do when you're alive, you all go to nothingness. So
yeah, you all just disappear. What's fucking crazy is that a couple of years ago, I remember somebody randomly on the internet, someone that doesn't matter. But I got in like a mini argument with them because they were saying that heaven and hell does exist in the Death Note universe, and that just that people that use the Death Note won't go. And I was like, you're just wrong. They blatantly say, like, they confirm that anyway, in order to just prove I was right, like, I was like arguing with this guy on the internet, and I was like so annoyed, I got all the chapters of Death Note and reread Death Note. All of Death Note.
Yeah, just to prove I'm wrong.
Just to get to the part where like they confirm that it's like heaven and hell doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it actually, so they have that conversation like in the very beginning of Death Note, but they revisit the conversation and like prove that heaven and hell doesn't exist actually way later in the story. So anyway, I got all the way there, and then I screenshot it, and I went back to that conversation. I fucking posted the screenshots, and I was like,
"That's me. That's my energy. I love proving people wrong. I love calling people out when they are wrong. So I totally, I relate to you there. But this show is basically, if you watch the first 2 episodes of Death Note, and you do not immediately get hooked, I think that you have really poor taste in anime and in storytelling in general, because 2 episodes of Death Note should hook every single human being who watches it. I don't care if you're a person who's never watched an anime in your life. Death Note is so outrageously good that I think anyone could immediately be gripped by it. It's so intense. Like episode 2 is when L comes in and he broadcasts to the world, supposedly, that, here I am, I'm L, I'm the greatest detective in the world, so he's Batman, and I am going to find you, Kira, killer. I'm going to find you, Kira, and I'm going to arrest you and I'm sentence you to death. That's like how he comes in, and his name is displayed on the screen. Lynn Taylor, right? And he's like, it's a guy sitting there, and immediately Yagami Light, he is. So this is another thing to put in perspective. Yagami Light is a high school student. He's like 17 years old, and L is fully like 25 years old. Like L's he's got a good amount of age on him. And he's also a detective for a living. So I'm not surprised at all when immediately Yagami Light, this stupid fucking high school kid who's, he's intelligent in one way, but he's also dumb as fuck in other ways because he's not
a genius, but he's brash.
Yes, he's not used to being a criminal. Like, I think that this is his introduction to being a murderer. Like, he's a mass murderer at the end of the day, but this is his introduction to it. So he's not refined at the fine details of it yet. He's also not used to being put up against literally the world's greatest detective from the bat, but he is. So he calls him out, tells him, I'm sentencing you to death. Light writes the name that he sees on the screen, Lynn Taylor, and kills the guy. Everyone in the world, supposedly, I'll keep using supposedly there, sees this guy die on national television, right? And the real L uses a voice synthesizer, comes in and says, hey, you just killed a guy who was on death row and was going to be killed today, right? He was going to actually be killed today, but that is not me. I just wanted to see how it works. And furthermore, you walked right into my trap. I broadcast this not to the whole world like I said originally. I actually only broadcast this in Japan. And even more specifically than that, I broadcast this only in the Kanto region of Japan. So I know exactly where you are. I was going to broadcast this to the rest of the world. However, I don't even need to do that now because you're so fucking stupid that now I can just literally know, okay, you're in Kanto, Japan, and I don't need to even show this to the rest of the world. No one else has to get involved.
Dude, this episode is So I agree with you pretty much 1,000,000% that by episode 2, this should hook you. Death Note is, I think, regarded as one of the best starter anime for people that don't watch anime and maybe want to try anime. Death Note is up there with one of the best and easiest ones to get into the genre.
Yeah.
I think the only thing is, some people are like really slow when it comes to like supernatural stuff. And so like some people are slow on the uptake for that. And they're like, well, I don't get it, because supernatural stuff. But I really do think that for almost anyone, like,
this is a really simple thing.
You should be hooked in.
Yeah, because the people aren't flying, right? The humans are still human. Every human in the show is still a human. And the only supernatural thing is really the death gods. Like, they look ridiculous, of course. They can fly, they can phase through objects and all that stuff. And they're invisible to anyone who's never touched a Death Note. But every human, and the show focuses around human drama, every human is just a human. The book is very simple to understand also because you just write a name and you imagine a person's face and you kill them. This would obviously be really bad in real life. And there wasn't even a point in China back when Death Note was airing that it got banned and censored and all types of stuff in Asian countries because of the fact that students started to carry around replica Death Notes and write the names of, let's say, bullies or their friends or just people being funny or being serious, but they used to literally write people's names in Death Notes, and it became a whole thing where it's like, okay, well, this is starting to get a little creepy. And
there was even a couple murders where, in Japan, I believe, where they left, like somebody got murdered and then left at the scene of the crime was a note that said like Kira.
Yeah, and that's also
and, like, Kira something. Those murders were solved and the person was caught. Obviously, that guy didn't have a death note, but yeah, it did cause like a bit of a cult following and like
Yeah, the
like
Death Note has some crazy power. So one of the abilities that it has is that before the person's death that you write, normally if you don't write any details about how they died, they just die of a heart attack. But you can actually manipulate the person for quite some time before they die. So you can make them do a murder-suicide, for example, right? You can make them do all kinds of crazy shit. And you also completely can wipe their mind of anything that they were thinking prior to when it takes effect, which is 40 seconds after you finish writing the details. We see this later with Ray Penbar's fiance, which we'll get to. Is one of the best parts of the entire series. But still early on in Death Note, So L closes in on Yagami Light very, very fast. And it is one of the greatest feats of L throughout the entire show. Like, obviously, there's plenty of more that he does, but this one is so good because it's immediate and it scares the fuck out of Light. And it makes Light realize that you have to be smarter if you're going to go against this guy. This is the world's greatest detective. You cannot be on some bullshit teenage mind thinking you have to think harder. And he fires back so quick. And this is what I love about it. Like we said, cat and mouse is also tennis, which they end up playing. This is a tennis match between two geniuses. So right back in like episode 3, Light purposely reveals that he's a student. He does all his killings at a specific time, which is after school hours, right? And L picks up on this, which is what he wants him to do. He also kind of lures him in by showing that he has access to some kind of police database, or he has access to police information that a normal citizen wouldn't have access to. This causes L to be suspicious of the police force. And Yagami Light's dad is actually the chief of the police. So he immediately starts to be suspicious of the police force, but then that makes them suspicious of him. And they're like, listen, we're not going to work with you. In fact, we're going to fucking arrest you because we don't know if you're the guy doing all of this. And furthermore, why are you investigating us? Like, how did you even know to do that? Like, they're starting to get really suspicious. So he basically turns the Japanese police force, the Kira force, on to L, and it makes L have to reveal himself because L was basically hiding behind a guy that would show up in a fucking trench coat, and he would have like a laptop, and it would just be the letter L on the screen, and he'd be talking to a voice synthesizer, and they were like, we're not doing this anymore. Like, if you want to actually help solve this case, you have to show yourself and prove that you're really who you say you are. Otherwise, there can be no trust because we're exposed here, and it's kind of confirmed that the way this guy's killing people, based on what L said in episode 2, you need to see me and you need to know my name. And I could tell that you need to because I just told you that. Like, he tells him, kill me now if you can. And obviously Light can't do it because he can't see L in episode 2 when he's making that broadcast. So he calls him out. And it's one of the moments where Light just has to hold that L. No pun intended. He just has to fucking hold that L. It's so good though. But yes, so right back, Kira fires back and he makes L expose himself for the first time essentially to the world. Like, he's now exposed. Like, everyone knows what he looks like. They've never seen this guy before. For all of this time that he's been
not everyone.
Okay, not everyone yet. Everyone doesn't know what he looks like yet, but the people who are on the Kira force, they all know what he looks like now. And they're kind of surprised. He's like this scrawny, little guy. He's like all in the suites. He sits really strange, a very weird guy. But yes, he's now exposed. So it's kind of like, oh shit. Like, now you're out in the open, and this is what Kira wants, because obviously he wants to kill him. After that, we kind of go into this part where the FBI starts to track Kira, and they literally start to follow Light around. And, he has a Shinigami with him at all times, Ryuk. And Ryuk tells him, there's a guy following you, and this guy is Ray Pinbar. Ray Pinbar has been assigned to him, and they get into this part where they're on a bus. This is one of my favorite parts, too.
Real quick note about Ryuk, because this is actually important to essentially what happens at the end of Death Note. Ryuk makes it clear to Light that, like, he's not necessarily on his team.
Yeah.
He just wants to be entertained, and the only reason why Ryuk told Light about Ray Penbar is he was like, because it's annoying me.
Yeah.
It's like, he's following you, but it feels like he's folling me.
And it's creeping him out. I thought that part was cool, too.
He's like, it's fucking annoying. And so that's, like, the only reason why he told him, because Ryuk, although I don't know. He's kind of rooting for Light, but at the same time, he's more so rooting for entertainment.
Yes, he also blatantly does. We can't cap and say he doesn't help him, because a lot of the situations that he gets in, he does help him. I think he even hinted that Naomi Misora had a fake name and all that stuff. Like, he laughed twice when he said the name, and that's how Light deduced it. So he definitely helps him either inadvertently or blatantly, but he does help him. And, even if he's trying to do it in an inadvertent way, Light is so smart that he picks up on every little detail. So even if you try to, you're just entertaining yourself by laughing, that laugh means so much. But yeah, so Ray Pinbar starts following him. They get into this bus incident where there's a guy literally trying to hijack the bus. And this is all orchestrated by Light. Light has this guy under his command, and he's going to do everything that Light wrote down, which is basically commit a suicide, kill himself, and everything, right? But while this is happening, he's talking to Ray Pinbar like, yo, I'm the son of the police chief, and I can try to stop this guy if you want. And Ray's like, no, don't do that. So he's basically showing, like, I'm a hero. Like, I'm a heroic kind of guy. I have it in me. It's my dad's the same way. He's pretending to be someone he's not. It's so brilliant. And basically he wins Ray Pinbar over by trying to act heroic in this situation that he completely orchestrated. No, he's in no danger whatsoever. And after the guy who was hijacking the bus gets hit by another bus and gets killed, Light convinces Ray Pinbar to show him his license. He shows him his ID, and Light writes his name down in the death note and also writes a command that before he dies, he's going to write the names of every other FBI agent on the Kira case. So without knowing it, Ray Pinbar not only gets himself killed, but he also kills the entire police force, the entire FBI force that is assigned to the Kira case, which then causes crazy ramifications because after that happens, not only does the FBI pull out of Japan, they're like, okay, fuck this. We don't know what's going on. Like, we're out of this. But then the Kira force in Japan also all quit except 5 people. Like, everyone who's on the case quits. Because after that happens, it's like, yo, everyone who's been like trying to track this guy and figure out what's going on, they all just died. And the way he had him write the names down, he had Ray Pinbar write the names down in ways that you couldn't tell who wrote the names down. So they all died at like random times and different times, trailing, because they were all trailing different people. So like one's assigned to Light, and there's a bunch assigned to other teenagers, I'm assuming. But he had them all basically start dying off at like random intervals. So it was no way to really track which one exactly was responsible for this. So no one can say, oh, it was Ray Pinbar tracking Yagami Light that started the whole chain effect of them dying. And that was the whole point of that. But it was a brilliant play by Light. And at this point, he actually has more wins over L at this point in the series. He's like completely dominating right now, using his powers and everything. It's actually great. So after, everyone's murdered, while that's going on, Light also is sending bullshit notes to L. Like, he's sending notes to him and they don't really mean anything. It's like Shinigamis love apples, and that kind of like freaks L out. He's like, what the fuck? Shinigamis don't exist to him, but it's just like a random note. And obviously that plays a part later on, but at the time it doesn't really mean anything. It's not really a hint to anything. It's just like a random riddle. And there's a bunch of random riddles, but they don't really mean anything. So that's kind of like the main beginning of the story. And I think if we were to jump to the next thing, is like after Ray Pinbar dies, then comes his fiance. And I think that is like probably the craziest part for me because it's so cold, right? It's such a cold part of the show. Like, Yagami Light is a cold motherfucker. So the wife comes, she's an ex-FBI agent, and she wants to tell the Kira task force that the person who her fiance was trailing is the person who he revealed his ID to, which got him killed. Because no one knows, like, they don't really know what exactly happened, but she basically knows who he revealed it to in a way. And she's like, whoever my fiance revealed his identity to is Kira, 100%. Like, that is the person who's Kira. So Light happens to hear and understand which information he has. So he's terrified. He's like, holy shit, I can't let her run into my dad or anybody from the Kira task force, the 5 people or L. Otherwise, it's all over for me. Because they'll realize, oh, I'm the one who killed Ray Pinbar. I'm Kira and everything. So he orchestrates this whole plot where he tries really, really hard to get her to reveal who she is. And she gives him a fake name off the bat.
Dude, this whole part has so much tension. This part,
when I first watched it, it's very tense.
It's like he just happens upon her and there's a massive back and forth. She gives him a fake name. He thinks he's won. He writes her name down. Nothing happens. He's like,
Ryuk
shit.
Starts laughing.
Yeah, and he's got to like run down the street to like catch up to her again. Like,
it's so brilliant. And Ryuk is laughing at him, but he's also, so Light does some things that are very obvious, but only if you really know what's going on. And that's what makes this really cool to me, is that he checks his watch a couple times. And at first it doesn't mean anything to her, but later on she does become a little suspicious of it. So he's checking his watch after he writes down her fake name that she gave him, and nothing happens. He was following behind her. He was like, all right, now bitch, you're going to go to your death. And she just like, Kara's going to be captured. You know that, right? And he looks at his watch and it's 40 seconds have passed. She should be going to commit suicide and everything, but that hasn't happened yet. So he's like, what the fuck? And then he notices, he's like, oh God, Ryuk laughed when she gave me the name, and Ryuk also laughed when I wrote it down. So clearly she gave me a fake name. So he's like, fuck, she's heading towards the police force and I have to stop her, but I don't want to push too hard, because if I pry too hard, it'll start to become suspicious. So he does the best thing you could possibly do. After he asks asks her to like explain what you know and everything, because she doesn't feel comfortable just talking to him like that. He says, listen, my dad is the police chief. The truth is, I'm actually a part of the Kira task force. And I'm not supposed to reveal myself to anyone, but I'm doing it to you because you're brilliant. And I could just tell that like you have really good skills. You're better than some of the FBI agents that we have on the team right now. Like you'd be a great asset. So he's like, and I really know that you would want revenge on Kira. So he's playing on her emotions because she does want revenge. She's blatantly out for revenge. And he knows how to, I guess, play into that. And this is so cool because at first she's very defensive. She's like, oh, I can't show you ID. I'd rather just give the information straight to the task force. So he says, well, fuck it. At this point, my only play is I'm the task force, bitch. Like, I'm the fucking task. It's me. I'm the task force. And he's like, you can join the task force. And the only thing you have to do that is get a recommendation from somebody already on it, L's approval, and also identification. Those are the 3 criteria. So he's like, L already basically approves of you, and I will give you a recommendation because you're brilliant and you have this great information to provide. So all I need at this point is to get your ID. And he tells her a lie that the reason why when you went to the building, no one was there is because you'll never meet them. Like no one ever meets the task force ever. That's not a thing. Like he's like, didn't you find it odd that when you went there was no one there? And she's like, yeah, you know what? That was kind of odd. He's like, yeah, it's because no one ever meets L. No one ever meets my father or anything like that because we have to keep our identities secret. So he mixes some truth with lies, which is exactly how you lie correctly. And at the end of it all, he gets her to fork over her ID. And he gives her ID back. He writes her name down above the paragraph because he wrote this ridiculous paragraph that they actually show you in the anime. And it says that she's going to commit suicide after researching the best ways to do so for a long time. So basically her search history on all of her devices is going to be her looking up how to kill herself in an efficient way. And she's going to kill herself in a way where the body won't be found for 48 hours. So he has this ridiculously well orchestrated plan of how to deal with her. And as soon as she hands over the ID and he writes the name down, he looks at his watch again. And he looks at his watch when there's like 10 seconds left. And she's like, why do you keep looking at your watch? And he smiles and looks at her and says, because I'm Kira. And the second he says that, the anime does this really cool thing where it goes all blue, like her face, everything becomes blue. And her eyes widen really big. And she looks terrified, but also there's a sense of regret and resentment and depression all mixed into one, like an immense amount of grief because she realizes what just happened. She knew coming into this that the person who her fiance, Ray Penbar, showed his ID to got killed for doing that. And then she did the exact same thing. She fell into the trap and she realizes it, right? But the scariest part is that he timed it so well that as soon as she realizes that her eyes gets big and the grief and everything comes over her face, she turns around all sullen-like and starts walking away. And he says, what's wrong? And she says, I have something I have to go take care of. And he just smiles. And it's because the death note has taken effect. The 10 seconds that she realized it, and she didn't, there was no time to really do anything. In those 10 seconds, the death note has now completely manipulated her into doing what he told her to do, which is go and research obsessively how to kill yourself and make sure that the body won't be found for 48 hours. So he's also using her as a test subject still in this moment, even though this is one of the most tense moments for him where he almost was found out. And honestly, he got very lucky that he even happened to be there when she showed up.
He also got lucky in this instance in that, even the second time, that was even her real name. Because this is part of the hubris, and this is kind of part of the philosophical argument of Death Note that people have, whether or not Light was right or whether he was good, that kind of stuff. But also whether or not Light is just a serial killer. Because on one end, he may have good intentions, but on the other end, he has a lot of the traits of just like a serial killer.
Yes, and killing her she's not a criminal. So she's
not a criminal, but also like the gloating, the I'm Kira right before she dies. It's like that's you know what I mean? Like,
bro, you remember the Ray Penbar scene?
You're no longer doing this for justice. Like
the Ray Penbar scene was insane too on the train.
Yeah, when he's on the train with the hood up and Ray Penbar is looking up at him, and then L sees the video and he's so fucking annoyed that he can't get another angle because L is like, who Ray Penbar is looking at is L.
Yes.
Like,
or is
the
Kira.
Way it's shot. Yeah. Or not. Yeah. It's Kira. He's like, Ray Penbar, like, the person he's looking at right now is Kira. And, like, there's nothing we can do
he can't fully see him. So it's crazy because Ray Penbar runs into Kira. dramatically and sadly gets killed by him. And then the way at the end, Light reveals himself, and it's the most sinister grin when the door closes on the train. It is the most sinister grin you will ever see. And he does the exact same sinister grin on his fiance. So he's now killed an entire couple, like an entire FBI couple. He's also killed several FBI agents.
Yeah, and the FBI agents.
So at this point, he is blatantly a murderer who's no longer just killing criminals. He is killing people who are trying to find out his identity. And I don't know how he really can go justify this, because at this point is like, well, these people are just trying to do their job, and their job is to, stop mass murderers from mass murdering. But he does what he has to do to survive, because literally if he gets found out, L told him in episode 2, I'm going to sentence you to death. Like, it will be me.
Yeah.
So that part is insane to me. And I really think that the way that episode is directed is one of the best episodes of anime for me. Like, that is literally probably top 10 episodes of anime for me, is literally Light versus Naomi Misora. That entire episode, like Kenny said, it's really tense. And that's what this show does really well for me, is that it just has these extremely tense moments where you don't know who's going to come out on the winning side, or if anyone.
It's one of the best reasons why it is, because there's a lot of people that get into anime through shonen, and technically Death Note is a shonen.
Yeah.
But typical shonen that we're used to is like a scrappy young kid that has some powers or gains powers and all that stuff, and it's action, like Fraser was saying. But what makes Death Note so cool is that it's a mystery cat and mouse detective kind of drama, but the levels of like intensity that it ramps up on, like it gives you the same like on your seat. It's like you're watching some of the most intense moments of a fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it really is.
action,
To
like,
me, I realized that I like this better. This is when I first started to realize that I didn't need action anime to survive anymore. It didn't need to be that. Storylines are way better for intensity and everything. It's the reason why I love Attack on Titan so much, is because I don't really care about the Flesh Gundams anymore. Like when Shock Factor season 1, Flesh Gundams are amazing. And then after that, it kind of just is like, okay, whatever, that's cool. And the action is really cool and everything. But the real great part of Attack on Titan and Death Note is just the drama between the humans. Like, that is the part that really gets me. The reveals.
It's the story. It's the characters. It's what's moving the plot forward. The Titans essentially are just the setting. The action is almost just like part of the setting, where it's like, it's really cool, really nice animation when you get like all that stuff is cool. I love watching a dope ass fight, or if like there's a fight, like some action anime are really good at interweaving a narrative into the fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. This is one of the anime where you start to realize like the narrative, like the things that people are saying can be so much more important and so much more thrilling and enthralling than just like, really cool punches and kicks.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so continuing on, L gets permission to probe Light's room. This is one of the funniest scenes in all of Death Note, but one of the best scenes as well, because not only is the music fantastic, I love the music for Death Note, by the way. I love the opening of Death Note, the first one. It's like Zetspo Billy or something. I don't know what they say, but it's really...
I like the first opening a lot. If I remember, I think the second opening is fucking terrible.
Yeah, it's like rage metal type. I'm not a fan of it either. But the first one I really like, and I just think that this part where L gets permission to install a bunch of bugs and cameras in Light's room, right? And this is against like human rights, right? We're not supposed to be surveilled without knowing it. We're not supposed to be surveilled. Like, if I'm in my room, there's not supposed to be just a tracker in my room watching me at all times. It's against my privacy and everything. But he gets permission because, the FBI can do that. They wiretap people in real life. So they get permission to do this. And Ryuk, first of all, Yagami Light's so brilliant that he knows immediately when he goes to his room. He knows immediately that somebody had been in his room and that things have been tampered with. So he walks in, and Ryuk is like, why are you not talking to me? Like, why are you not saying anything? Why are you not doing what you normally do? You usually feed me an apple or something by now. Like, he walks in, he's completely silent. His whole demeanor is changed, according to Ryuk. Now, to L, who's watching him, it looks like he's just doing his regular thing. But he gets up to his room, and as soon as he goes to open the door, he's like, okay, I installed something to know if somebody ever came to my room, and that shit was broken. And then he goes in his desk, and he like pulls down the Death Note from his little secret compartment, and he basically figures out, using Ryuk's help, where every single camera is and where the blind spots would be. So then he orchestrates this plan that he will continue to kill people by using a small television. I haven't seen these in years, by the way, but now we have better devices. This is an old anime. Like it's almost like 20 years old.
This anime, what, 2006 maybe?
Yeah, it's almost 20 years old. It's really, really old, but he has a really tiny television. I used to see these when I was younger. People used to just have portable televisions, and he turns the sound off, has it in a potato chip bag, and he uses it to see the news and see who's like what criminals being broadcast, and he writes names while eating chips. So it's that intense comedic scene where he's like, I'll take a chip and I'll eat it. If you watch the English dub, it's terrible, obviously, but it's one of the funniest things. I love it in Japanese. In English, it's just funny. Like it's just pure comedy, but it's still one of the best scenes in the anime because it just shows you the levels that Light will go to not only make L look absolutely fucking crazy. Because remember, L had to get permission from Light's dad to even install all of these surveillance cameras and stuff. So the dad is obviously watching L watch his son, and nothing is happening. To him, his son is studying for this really important test he has coming up, and it looks like he's innocent. It's just like, oh, and then he, at one point, this is the funniest shit to me. At one point, Light pulls out a porn mag and just starts watching fucking porn. Like he's just like blatantly looking at a pornographic magazine. And that's not something that he's even interested in or would do normally, but he bought it with the intent to look like a regular teenager that's his age. And it works. So like there's a part where L just has to eat shit and die by watching Light look at titties and ass in like a porn mag.
I think there's actually a pretty funny interaction, if I remember, where Light's dad kind of like is surprised that he's looking at porn, and L goes, well, I mean, that's normal for kids his age.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just so funny because L is, on one hand, he's saying it's normal, but on the other hand, he's really annoyed that he's not getting anything. And he's like, how the fuck does this guy, he's not giving him anything to work with. He just seems completely normal. He's studying, he's looking at porn, he's a perfectly normal high school student, right? And if he was watching me, he'd see a little bit more than he wanted to. So this part was great, not only because of I'll take a chip and I'll eat it, but because of the way Light fools L and makes him look ridiculous. And then eventually he has to take all the cameras out. So the end of it, the result of it is that, okay, you surveilled my son for a week. You got nothing. Like I'll watch with you. You got nothing. Take that shit out his room. So they take everything out. And then now Light can just go back to being normal inside of his own home. So I think that part was great. There was also another thing in there where he like broadcast on TV while Light is in the living room with his sister and his mom. There's a broadcast that says 1,500 cops or 1,500 new detectives are on the Kira case. And it's meant to like get a reaction out of Light. So L's like biting his nails and he's staring directly at Light on the surveillance. Like, and Light is not supposed to know that he's even being watched. Of course he knows, but he's not supposed to know. So when he sees that broadcast, if he is Kira, the real Kira will probably have a reaction to that. He'd probably leave the room or be like, oh, this is so dumb. Why are they hiring so many people for this guy? He actually just completely is indifferent to it, doesn't give any reaction whatsoever, and then goes upstairs and starts jerking off. So that whole part is great. We get some details about L and his posture because at some point, he says, I get an amp from being in this really weird position. Like he gets a fucking mental state amp. It is ridiculous. Like apparently he's at 40% of his mental state abilities when he's not sitting in a specific posture. And that posture, if you know it from the anime, is like when he's sitting in the chair, but his feet are literally in the seat of the chair. I used to try to sit like that, but it's so outrageously uncomfortable for a normal person to do that for a long time. But I wanted to be like L when I was younger in ways. So I would try to like mimic a lot of the things that he did. The way he eats sweets, he kind of holds them with two fingers and holds them really high above his head, drops them in his mouth and all types of stuff like that. He likes to stack things. And
I think one of the, I think when he talks about that is when he talks about like, it's when him and Light are talking to each other and he like changes the way he's sitting because he says he can think better or something like that. I forget.
He does. Exactly, he changes his posture and he gets a blatant amp. So in his amp state, he's even more ridiculous when he's sitting in his amp state. But what's cool about this is that in his base form, right? So in his base form, when he's sitting like a normal fucking person, he approaches Light at his college and he tells him like, yo, I'm L. And he gives him the name of a Japanese pop star named Hideki Ryuga.
Yeah, he like signs up to the college as Hideki Ryuga.
Yes.
So like And everybody, like, at first, they're like, "Oh my god, Hideki Ryuga's gonna go to school here," and then they see L, which just looks like this fucking he's got this big baggy shirt on, these dark circles under his eyes, like, he looks like he hasn't left his room in weeks, which is, technically true.
Yes. He looks like a basement dweller for sure. And so he blatantly approaches Yagami Light, lets him know, I'm L. My real name is Hideki Ryuga. And what the intention was, and this is a brilliant thing that L did, the intention was, if you do try to kill me using that name, you'll kill the pop star. Because the pop star is like telling me your name is Robert Kelly. And then if I try to kill you with the name Robert Kelly, I'm going to actually kill the singer R. Kelly. There's no way I wouldn't, because his picture will pop into my head. Like right now, even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about what R. Kelly looks like. And even if you told me that's your name and I try to do both, there's a high chance that I'll just end up killing the one that's more popular that I've known my whole life to be Robert Kelly. So he uses a very popular pop star's name as his name. And it's funny because Light knows, like, obviously that's not your fucking name, but why would he reveal himself to me? That why would he get this close? And he realizes, okay, he's getting this close because this is his best chance to catch me. Like, he needs to be this close in close proximity of me. It's the only way he's ever going to get me. So that part is great because he passes the exam. Both of them pass with perfect scores. So as far as intellect goes, from this test, like we basically get that their feats are exactly the same. They're able to both pass this with flying colors. And I guess it's a real big feat for L because he's not allowed to sit in his favorite posture. So he's not in his buff amp state. Just to throw that out there. But yeah. So I love the part where he approaches him. It's like, okay, the gloves are off. I'm tired of playing this like behind the police force in secret mode.
That's
I don't want to do this
one of
anymore.
those. That's just like another one of those super tense moments where just the way it's when he just says like I'm L, like it just happens so suddenly.
Yeah. No, it really does. And they do that thing where I think that they make L blue and they make Light red. This happens a lot throughout the anime. They change their colors. So bad guy red, good guy blue, or however you want to look at it, because there's really no good or bad guy. They're actually both pretty bad people overall when you really get into it.
I do think arguably, and I think this is an important aspect of Death Note, in that neither one of them are necessarily good or bad, and I think if I remember correctly, L kind of knows this. Like L knows that he's a piece of shit.
Yeah,
he obviously knows that
he's aware
Kira's
of it.
Murderer.
And he not only does he know it, he also does things that he's like, this is definitely pushing the boundaries of human rights.
Yes.
I'm doing things like, for example, the surveillance thing is blatantly just wrong. And he does it anyway. But then it gets more intense later on when he blatantly arrests Light and Misa. Like
he's willing to do, because the thing with L, and what's kind of cool is that there's the police force, they want to like ideally hold up justice. But L more so just wants to win.
Yes.
Like, yeah, L's very childlike. Well,
Yeah, so L definitely does have very childish tendencies, or very just, I want to win at all costs. And it reminds me of myself when I was younger. I'm a very competitive person. I said it a million times on this podcast by now. But I think when you're really, really competitive, you start to lose sight of like morals and how to have fun and stuff like that. And so all of that is out the window. At this point, this motherfucker's like, I just want to win, and I'm willing to violate humans and use humans in any way. Like, for example, episode 2, when he gets that guy killed by Light, he gets him killed by Kira on national TV. That is kind of fucked up in itself. Like, that guy, yes, in one way, that guy is going to be executed by the government on that day, but then to like use him as a prop to essentially test out a theory, that's already questionable behavior. Like, that is the beginning of some questionable shit.
What's so interesting about that is he does that, he sets that up without the police knowing, basically, or without most of the police knowing. Obviously, I guess he knew, like, he had to let some people know to set it up.
Yeah.
But that's a tactic that he enjoys doing. Later on in the series, he tries to do the tactic again. But now his comrades that he's working with, the Kira Special Task Force, they kind of don't want him to do it. They're like, no, we can't just, like, kill someone. And he's just like, well, why not? He was like, we have to test these rules. Because there's a part where a whole fucking scheme happens, and there's fake...
and
L suspects there's
like
fake
two
rules.
fake rules in there. And those 2 rules are brilliant. I actually have them written down because they're so good, but I couldn't remember them off the top of my head. So one of the rules is if the person using this Death Note fails to consecutively write names within 13 days of each other, you will die. So you have to write names every single day. And if you stop, within 13 days, you'll just die. Like if you don't do a name at some point and 13 days pass, you will just die. So you have to continue to write names. And then the other one is if the Death Note is made unusable by tearing it up or burning it, all the humans who have touched the Death Note till then will die.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, like at that point when this rule comes into play, everyone's touched it. The entire task force has touched it. Like obviously, and they can't just burn it or destroy it because one, Light came up with a really great ploy to forget everything because the Death Note has that ability. You can choose to forget everything about it. You literally don't know anything about its existence, and you go back to the way you were before you ever found out about it. So if it were to get destroyed, it would be really bad for him because then he would just never be Kira again. So he makes sure that the Death Note never gets destroyed, but he also protects himself by saying that if you don't write in it for 13 days, you die. So when L captures him and Misa, the killings start again because Light told Rem, the death god above Misa, he told Rem, like, listen, take this Death Note and give it to somebody who's going to savagely use it for personal gain. Find someone who's just unapologetically selfish and give it to that person. And I promise you, not only will I find it when I lose my memory, like I'll find it again. Trust me on that. I'll find it. But also, I need to make sure that the killings restart while I'm incarcerated. And that's exactly what happens. So this guy, was like Higuchi or something like that. This guy named Higuchi, he ends up with it. He's like the head of some corporation, and he starts killing people so that his company is worth more money and they end up doing better in the stock market and stuff like that. And basically for personal gain, just like Light won it. But what this does is while they're incarcerated and Misa has lost her memories, Yagami Light has lost his memories, they're being tortured and held against their will. And mind you, the police chief, Light's dad, has to watch this. He hates it. He hates every minute of it. But he's like, listen, you got 14 days. And if 14 days pass and you don't get enough evidence to convict my son, who you really believe is Kira, only by 5%.
It's even worse than that. It was, I'm pretty sure it was long. It was like 2 months or 3 months. Like it was because they didn't find out about those fake rules until after the incarceration. Light was incarcerated for like two full fucking months, I think.
Oh, jeez.
Like he was incarcerated for months because when he goes in, Light, when he still has his memories, he tells L, like, don't let me go no matter what until you know that I'm not Kira. And then like he goes in and then like he's incarcerated for multiple days with his still having his memories, and then he gives up his memories and like he's in there for even longer, and months go by and he's fucking being watched and all this fucking crazy shit. It's not until after he gets out and he's handcuffed to L for fucking however many weeks, and L and Light together end up finding Higuchi and finding it's not until all of that and they get the Death Note in their possession that they find the fake rules. And then basically the whole task force is like, oh, these rules, like they prove that it could have never been Light because he would have died when he was incarcerated. And it just so many things that Light set up to be like, yeah, look, it's not me. And then L was just like, nah, I think it's you.
So this is probably the absolute, when we talk about the best plays that either of them have made in the entire series, I think that this entire ploy is the scariest, most broken shit in all of Death Note. Like this is so complicated. It's even hard to explain, honestly. But
yeah, the whole setup with the memories and
it's fucking good though. Essentially, the only thing you need to know is that the way it all started, Misa enters the fray, and she is Kira number 2. She's a fanatic because Kira.
Hold on. Oh my god. Okay, I'm sorry, but before, because you're about to explain that whole plot, but just once again talking about like tensions rising. The fucking introduction of Kira 2 was crazy because there's this whole thing that sets up, and then the Kira 2 killings start, and Light doesn't know what the fuck's going on because now there's essentially Death Note killings happening.
Yes,
and
he's
now
not doing
Light,
them.
and he's not doing them. He's like, what the fuck? But this second Kira is pretending to be Kira. L, the fucking genius that he is, he deduces pretty quickly that like that's not Kira.
Yeah,
It's like, I don't
that's
think
not the one that I've been
that's not the
tracking this
yeah,
whole
that's not the
time.
one we're chasing. And then at this point, they've almost confirmed as close as they can without having real proof that Kira needs a face and a name to kill. So things happen. If you watch Death Note, you already know. We're just getting hyped about the moments. There's a part where the SPK, the Special Police Kira Force, I think that's what they're called.
Yeah, it's called the SPK.
They go into this radio station, this TV station that's like praising Kira. They go in, but they have fake IDs. That's right. They have fake IDs. Nobody knows their name, I think. But the point is, they just die. Like some of the members just end up straight.
They start
dying.
getting killed at the fucking doors while they're on TV. So they're on TV, right? It's being broadcast to people watching the news, and they start dying. And that tells L, oh shit, this new Kira, the one who's blatantly not the one I've been tracking this entire time, this new one doesn't need to know your name, right? Like, or they don't need to blatantly see you to kill you anymore. Like they can basically just kill you with less information than the one I've been tracking. And it's because she has the eyes. So like the Shinigami eyes make it where you can just see someone's full name and their lifespan above their head. And people who have a Death Note in their possession, you can't see their lifespan. So Misa was able to basically find out that one, Light is Kira, because they were supposed to meet up and she doesn't show up. But
so much shit.
But she does show up at the same time. She's just in disguise. And she looks around the cafe and she sees, I think the place called Blue Note is like a cool place to meet for those two. It doesn't mean anything to L, but it means everything to somebody who has a Death Note. So like Yagami Light picks up on it. Oh, this bitch really does have a Death Note. They want to meet at some place called the Blue Note. He goes there, gets stood up, but she actually is there. She has the eyes. She sees that he doesn't have a lifespan, which means that he is Kira, because only people with a Death Note wouldn't have a lifespan above them. And that's when you get to the whole plot of like, you know, she's been killing people. L, being extremely smart, realizes, holy shit, the second one doesn't need the same information. Normally you need to know their name and to have a good visual of what they look like. She's just doing it without having all the information. So that's terrifying. But he quickly closes in on them. So there's a part where, you know, like Misa is basically dating Yagami Light, and he has her use the eyes to find out the name, like L's real name. So she does find it out. She looks at L. She knows his real name. And I think it's just L Lolia anyway. But she finds out his real name and she goes to make a phone call to call Yagami Light. Or actually, I think an opposite. Yagami Light goes to make a phone call to retrieve the name. He's like, I've won. It's my win. L, you fucking lost. It's over for you. I got you. He walks away. He pulls out his cell phone. He calls up Misa. And it starts ringing, and behind him, you just hear Moshi Moshi, and it's fucking L holding up Misa's phone. He's like, whoops, I must have stolen this by accident during all the commotion. So like Misa, because she's an idol, she got bombarded with a bunch of people, and in that commotion, L actually stole her cell phone, knowing exactly what was happening somehow. Like he just had the intuition to do so, and he stole her phone, and he answers it when Light calls. He's like, what's up? And he's like, well, I'm calling my fucking girlfriend. Why do you have her phone? Basically, like that's basically how this plays out. And he's like, oh, yeah, I must have grabbed this by accident. So that part is amazing. Right after that, because of the tapes and stuff that she sent in to the task force, because Misa is just a little unhinged. She's not as wise and as smart as Light. She's definitely
she's not a genius. Like
she's not on the same level as Light and L.
So much evidence. Like
she also reveals that Shinigamis are real to the world. She reveals that Shinigamis are real. You know, Light was going to use her anyway and then kill her. Like right after he killed L using her eyes, he was just going to kill her. But things get really complicated. So she gets arrested because they find hair follicles in the tapes and stuff that she's been sending in to the news stations and stuff like that. And so they realize, okay, it's a woman. This is the woman who it is. And they basically detain her. And this is like whole bondage scene that she's like, I gotta pee, and she's gagged, and she has all these like straps across her boob, straps across her pelvis, and all of those areas. She's all like bondaged up, and she's like, hey, I really gotta pee. Like she basically doesn't have on real clothes. And El's just studying her and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, because he's like, I know basically that you are the second Kira. I just need to prove it. And that's kind of what this entire show is about. The cool thing is that L does know exactly who Kira is. He even knows who Kira 2 is. And he's kind of known since episode 2 who they are, but he can't prove it. And that is the entire premise. Like, it's only...
a very...
Go ahead.
Okay. It's a very interesting take on the cat and mouse thing. It's one of the things that makes Death Note so unique. I hate Mr. Potato Head, and I hope somebody has a Death Note and kills him. But it's something that makes it so unique. In typical Sherlock Holmes styled stories, when someone is being chased or you're trying to find the criminal, there's a detective. Typically, the detective doesn't know who the criminal is yet. You know, like, the whole idea is like figuring out who the person is, catching that person. What makes Death Note, one of the things that makes it very unique and interesting is that, like Fraser said, L knows who Kira is. Like, even though he says like 5%.
He says 5%, but it's so much harder than literally every other person that it's you. Like, it's just fucking you. And there's so many things that make it you. The fact that I know that the killer has a close proximity to the police force and is able to access police information, right? That's one thing. The fact that you're in the Kanto region of Japan and you're a student, he's a fucking student. The fact that you're super intelligent, he's super intelligent. Like, there's all of these things that blatantly point that it's just you. And so I know it's you. It's kind of like if somebody steals something, right, in a room full of people. Let's say, you know, a lot of people listening to this are Yu-Gi-Oh players, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But there have been many events where things have gotten stolen. The problem is there are tons of people there. So even if you know who stole your things, you have to also be able to prove it, right? And the burden of proof is on the accuser, which is unfortunate because you can know 120%. I know for a fact you stole my things. But because the thief is smart, they did it at a time when there were a lot of people around. It's really hard to tell exactly who did it when there are a ton of people. They could point the finger at anyone. They'd be like, why do you think it's me? This person was also around. What the fuck? There were 10 people. Yeah. There were 1,000 people in a room. How are you just going to say it was me? So they have that defense, and you have to find a way to prove it. And that's kind of the entire issue with Death Note, and not in a bad way, but the entire issue where L can never actually get concrete proof because of the fake rules and because of all the other elusive maneuvers that Light has done to remain anonymous, hiding in plain sight. It's broken. It's one of the most broken things about the show is that the killer is known about very early on. Like, Light is known very quickly, and he's handcuffed at one point. And I think one of the things we're going to talk about is like in his, like how he gets captured and he's in his good state and all that. But we'll get to that in a second. But I think you did want to elaborate a little bit more about the whole cat and mouse aspect of it and the burden of proof.
Yeah. It's just interesting because, like we said, we know who the killer is and we know who the detective is, and it's not necessarily about proving, or it's not necessarily about like figuring out who the killer is. It's just proving that he could be the killer, that he has whatever this magic fucking power is to cause these Kira killings.
Yeah, it's one thing to just be like, okay, y'all can be Light, you're Kira, I'm arresting you. That doesn't, like, that wouldn't do anything. You have to release him, and you don't have enough proof. You don't know how he's doing it. How can you explain this kid is nowhere near any of these murders? So how can you explain that, right? And this is a supernatural thing, which really sucks for L because he's never gone up against anything like this before. So to go up against something that's completely supernatural like this is a really big handicap to begin with. The fact that the Shinigamis are on the side of Light is also a real big power boost. And honestly, I think that's the only thing that really separates them two. I think that they're very even in terms of intellect. Like, I think they're both really smart. And they're outrageously smart. Again, the whole thing we were going to start talking about is like the nasty plot.
Inhumanly smart. Like, they're insane.
Yeah, because people say, oh, if I had a Death Note, I would have done this. I would have been this dumb. But honestly, guys, you would have got caught in the first day. Like, they would have knocked on your door and been like, come the fuck out. Like, there's no world. The other cool thing about the show is that while L has the burden of proof on is on him to prove, like, I'm Kira, sure, you know that, but you have to prove it. The other crazy thing is that Light could win at any point he chooses to. Like, literally at any point, Light could just win and the show wouldn't even be 15 episodes long. He could just say to Ryuk, who tells him like episode 3 or some shit, you can make a deal with me and you can get the same eyes that I have. And these eyes allow you to see the name, the real name, and lifespan of every human being walking. So Light contemplates it, but the issue is that you have to give up half your life in order to do that. And Light is like, well, my goal is essentially to create a society where people don't have to worry about crime and all that stuff and wars and things like that. So with that being my goal, if I cut my life in half, then I won't be around long enough to see it through and make sure that it lasts. So it's kind of pointless. Now this is actually amazing because on one hand, at this point in the show, like, he's fully willing to kill FBI agents and stuff like that, people who are not criminals, but he still believes that he's doing it for this cause. At the end of the day, it's like the ends justify the means. This is like an extreme example of the ends justify the means. So yes, I'm killing FBI agents. I could half my life to guarantee kill the one guy who could probably figure me out, but I think I can beat him straight up. Like I think I can beat him without giving up half my life, which is there's arrogance, and this is on both sides. But both Light and L have a lot of arrogance. They both of them, there's a ton of hubris, and you see it when they play tennis. The tennis scene is great because both of them want to win really badly, but they also don't want to win too hard.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And talking about the hubris thing, there's things L could do to like pseudo prove that Light is Kira and like definitively know. He wants to do it in a way where he really proves it. Like, for example, I think there's a part where L contemplates, like, if he just kills Light and the Kira killing stop, then, like maybe there's a way he could prove that Light was Kira if Light dies.
Yes.
But L has it, like, in him, like, he wants to prove, like, infallibly, without any shadow of a doubt, that it is Light. And he wants Light to be alive to know it. Like, he wants to prove that Light is Kira, and he wants everybody to know that Light is Kira.
Yes, he wants to expose him to the world, so that way it's like, it's my victory, you got exposed, you look ridiculous, I'm going to make you take the walk of shame like Cersei did in Game of Thrones, that type of vibe. Also, there's a part where, and this is, you said this earlier, but I'm going to call back to it, when he is incarcerated, when Yagami Light is incarcerated, there's a part where L thinks about using the Death Note blatantly. Or not when he's incarcerated, but like later on, when they're like handcuffed and stuff, and they have a Death Note in their possession, and they know about the Death Note. It's no longer a secret. Higuchi's been captured. They have it in their possession, right? So they know that this thing is real, but L wants to use it. L is like, only thing I can't, because every other rule makes sense and every other rule is fine. The two rules that Light wrote that are fake are what's really grinding his gears, and they're making it where Light is innocent. These are the only two things making sure that Light is innocent, and they happen to be the last two written on the bottom of the thing. So it's also like, God damn it, like. These last two things are so absurd. And I want to just disprove, I don't need to disprove one of them. I actually don't need, so the cool thing is, you only need to prove that one of them is fake to know that the whole thing is bullshit, right? So even though one of them says, oh, if you burn it, everyone dies, well, that's too risky. Like, that's too Al's like, well, I'm not going to do that. I touched it. And so did the whole task force. That's stupid. So I'll never actually burn it, because then everyone just dies, like, including Yagami Light actually touched it too. So he's like, well, I'm not going to do that. So that's ridiculous. But I'd rather do the one where I just write a name. Like if I kill someone with it and
wait 13 days
and I don't die, that rule's bullshit. And so he wants to use it, but then of course he can't use it because that's just not okay. And it's so good, man. It's so good. The cat and mouse and the traps.
He's like, it's going to be somebody on death row. It's going to be the day they die. I think there's even a point where he literally gets permission behind the task force back because they don't want to do it. I think he gets permission from like America or like somebody to use the Death Note as the means of execution for a criminal. And he's like, I'm going to do it on this day. Like I'm going to kill this guy, and then in 13 days, if I'm not dead, that rule's fake, and your son's Kira. And then in that time, like, just like straight up, in that time though, I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but like literally right before L has the chance to really set all that up and do it is when Kira, aka Light, sort of like pulls a fucking full maneuver in the action, gets Rem to fucking kill herself for him, and like...
Yeah. So I will explain a bit, the best I can, the nasty plot that Light puts together to defeat L. This is basically what ends up getting L killed in the long run. So Rem is absolutely infatuated and basically in love with Misa Misa, and Light finds out the way Misa Misa got her Death Note. There was a Shinigami named Jealous, and he was obsessed over her because she's really beautiful and everything from an anime standpoint, I guess. So she's also an idol. So just imagine like Britney Spears or Taylor Swift or some shit. So Jealous is a Shinigami who's been observing this human for a long time, and she's about to be actually killed in an alleyway somewhere. Like somebody's about to kill her.
Yeah, it's like one of those crazy fans that like stalk her and like try to
Yes.
kill her.
And this has happened in real life. Rest in peace. I think her name was maybe Christina Perry or something like that. There was someone on American Idol who got killed in the
Yeah,
same exact way to like a meet and greet. It was really fucked up. I
I
forget her
think
name,
so.
so sorry if it's not Christina Perry, but this happened like in the last 5 years, and I'm sure it's happened other times, but I just can remember in pretty much recent history, a crazy fan was on some shit like, I'm gonna go to this meet and greet and I'm gonna make sure that only I can have you forever because in death like we're together. So that exact situation plays out in Death Note where Misa Misa was about to be killed by some crazed fan, and jealous, witnessing this is about to happen, writes the guy's name down and kills him first. Now, Death God's only job is to write the names of humans, and when they do that, they extend their own lifespan. So it's in their best interest to kill people. What's crazy though is that the only way to kill a Death God is basically to have a Death God save a human being and do the opposite of what their job is. So when Jealous uh, basically extended Misa Misa's lifespan, he kills himself. And Rim
Because
witnessed,
she reached her natural end of her lifespan.
yeah,
Like
she
that
was
was
supposed to die in
naturally,
that alleyway.
and because he killed the criminal that was going to kill her, he extended her lifespan, and
Yeah.
he
So
dies
Rim,
because of it.
another deaf guy, Rem, witnesses this happen. Witness Jealous turn into dust. So Light finds out all of this, and when Jealous turns to dust, his Death Note is left behind. So Rim's like, okay, well, Jealous would have wanted you to have this. So she flies to the human world, gives the Death Note to Misa Misa, and Misa Misa makes the deal for the eyes. So, and also, the craziest thing is that she gets all of Jealous's life added on top of her lifespan. So like when
Yeah,
a deaf guy does this, they die, but the human being who they saved gets their fucking lifespan added to. It's actually absurd what happens. So she ends up.
because important note, when like you said, when death gods kill humans, they gain that human's lifespan. Um, and the only way for a death god to die, like they can't starve to death, but they have to just run out of life,
Yeah.
and that's why they kill humans to gain their lifespan, so they can essentially live forever. The only other way for death god to die is how Fraser explained, where if they try to extend a human's life.
Yep.
The important thing is when humans kill people to Death Note, they don't gain life. All of the people Light kills, it doesn't extend his lifespan in any way.
That would also 100% corrupt anyone who got it too, by the way. Like
Yes.
that would be so much more of an incentive. Like if I found a Death Note in real life, obviously I think that, I'm being honest, I do think that I would use it. Like when I started this podcast off by saying that like a millennial who found it was going on a killing spree, I probably would. I don't know exactly what kind of person I would kill, but like I would definitely use it. There's no way I wouldn't try it. Like I would 100% try it. There's no world where I don't find a fucking thing on the ground. Like let's say Death Note didn't exist. I find it, I read it, and I'm like, what the fuck? I would definitely try it, and I probably would try it on somebody bad to begin with. I'm not going to name any names, but I would try it on someone who I think is a bad person, like a criminal or a horrible human being, and see what happens. And if that person actually died in the exact way that I said, I don't know what would happen after that. But if my lifespan, if it was written on the Death Note that my lifespan would be increased by the difference between when they died and when they would have died, oh God.
Yeah, it becomes a different thing, right? Like let's say for example,
Like there's a benefit to using it at that point.
yeah, let's say it's 2004 and you find it and you go, okay, I'll write Osama bin Laden, right?
Yes,
And
perfect. That's a
you know what I
perfect
mean?
one. That's great.
And yeah, so then you write Osama bin Laden and you do it in a way where like he reveals himself that you know, so that way you know he's dead
Yep.
and then he dies. And then like, okay, now you know that this thing works. And I could see like a person being scared of that power, not wanting to use it, etc. I can also see someone like, okay, well, kind of like Light only doing it to kind of save the world, but maybe not going the crazy serial killer spree that he went on. But like, if there was something in there that said it literally extended your life, it would become a real slippery slope. Because then you're like, then that's where greed comes in. Now
Yes,
you're no
because I want to
longer.
live longer than a normal human being. Or like, I already don't want to die. If I'm being honest, like, I like it
Yeah,
here. Things are getting better over time. I mean, with monkeypox and COVID going around, maybe not, but I do think that as time goes on, advancements in technology, shows and video games and everything that I enjoy are just getting better and better and better over time. And I want to be here to experience these things. There's going to come a time for all of us where we're just going to have to say, yeah, it's time to go. Like,
yeah.
it sucks. So
So
there's no way I'll be able to resist that temptation. I'm being completely honest here in this podcast about this. Like I would for sure, I know myself, I would use it to extend my lifespan.
Oh, for sure. I think most
I think
people
I
would.
do
I
think most
think
people would, even if they're
it's
not
one of
willing
those
to
things.
admit it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I don't think I don't know how many people would actually just as is use the Death Note. I think maybe a lot of people would try it, but I think that after seeing that it works, I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't do it because I think most people, believe it or not, are somewhat like morally good and have a conscience and like don't want to kill people.
Yeah,
But I think if the
most
rule
people are not
exists
me.
I think if the rule exists that extended your life, that flips, and I think 99% of people go, okay, well, I mean, this just extends my life, so I'm using it. So all of that to be said, though, what makes it so crazy is that when a death god kills itself to save a person, the fact that their remaining lifespan goes to the because that is the only way a human's lifespan gets expanded in these Death Note means is so fucking crazy because we don't know how long Jealous's lifespan was supposed to be, but it
Yeah,
could be 1,000
that's
fucking
what I was going to say.
years.
It's monstrous. So when she does make so she uses the eyes and makes the deal, which cuts her lifespan in half from the added amount that Jealous had. So let's say he had 1,000. Now she has 500 plus years, which is still, I don't even know how that works, but this is an anime. So you just have to roll with it. And
Yeah.
we never get to experience anyone actually living to, let's say, 500 years. Like, how do they age? At
That's one
some
of the
point,
one shots he needs to do. He's done a couple one shots. I would love for that one
I would
shot.
love a one
Like,
shot where the person lives for over 100 years and they still look the same. Because I'm wondering if you age the same.
yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to be in the body of a 100-year-old person and just
Yeah, yeah,
alive. Because
yeah.
that's not, I don't, in real life, I don't even want to live that long. I do not want to live to 100. Like, I have no desire to do that personally.
Yeah.
I just know from knowing other people who are 90 plus years old or even 100 years old, their quality of life is so terrible compared to my super young quality of life right now that I just don't want to live like that. That's just me personally. Obviously people have their own opinions about that, but I just do not want to be 100 years old where I can't do things for myself anymore. Everything hurts. I have to take all these medications and shit like that. And yeah, some people are going to be like, oh, but if you just take care of yourself, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not doing that. I fucking eat cheesesteaks and water ice and ice cream and cakes and pies and baked mac and cheese and candy yams and all types of shit that is not good for you. And I love it. I love to indulge in things that please the flesh. And I have no intention on like trying to abstain from all of life's pleasures to extend my life to 100 for what? Like even if you do all of those things and you make it to 100 years old, your body is still deteriorated. Your brain has still deteriorated to such a level that the quality of life, you just can't convince me that it's good. It's just not. So
Yeah, with all that, it'd be so interesting to see how they age, what it's like. Like he's done, like we said before, several one shots with interesting concepts in them. It'd be interesting to see the one shot where like we see a human live past 100, past 200,
yeah,
and see what that looks like.
that would be amazing, actually. Okay, so I want to backtrack and just kind of give like an overall scheme of what the main thing that he does to kill L. So, like I said, this is Light finds out how Misa Misa got her death note, which also what it really does is it tells Light how to kill a death god.
Yes,
Very early
it
on,
gives him another another tool in his tool belt to play with.
He's so smart. So as soon as he hears this story, the only thing he's thinking is, oh, so that's how to kill you. Rem also threatens him very early. She tells him, because she knows this kind of person. She's been around for God knows how long. She knows exactly what kind of person he is. She sees right through him. So while Misa Misa is absolutely infatuated with him and can't see through his nonsense, Rem can, and she says, if anything happens to that girl, I'm going to kill you. Period.
If she dies before her lifespan, Rem was like, I see her lifespan. I know when she's supposed to die. So if she dies before then, I know it was you.
Yup. If anything happens to her that will kill her, I'm going to kill you. So as soon as he gets threatened, he realizes, God damn it, that means I can't blatantly put Misa Misa in a line of fire and use her and like kind of have L and Misa Misa go at it and then they kill each other and be done with it. I can't just do, because that was his plan. It's like, I'm gonna use Misa Misa, she has the eyes, kill L for me, then I'll kill her, tie up all loose ends, and boom, we're done here. Rem threatens him. And so now he's like, okay, I got to figure out a way to deal with her and L. How do I kill two birds in one stone? So he comes up with this elaborate plan. I'm going to relinquish ownership of the Death Note. Misa Misa's also going to relinquish ownership of the Death Note. I'm going to bury Misa Misa's Death Note in a random forest somewhere. And I want Rem to take my Death Note and give it to some really selfish, greedy person, which is Higuchi. And I will eventually track it down because I will become a detective on the good side. When I come back into my memories, we'll go from there. So what ends up happening is everything that he thought plays out perfectly. There's a couple minor things that happen that kind of reveal more so that he is Kira while he's in his good state, but like it's nothing that L can use concretely. And also Misa while she's in her good state. I call it creamy light because when his eyes, they draw his eyes differently when he's creamy. Like when he's a good person, when he loses his memories of the Death Note, creamy light is just so ridiculous. I can't stand it. Like he's so ridiculous. So he's like, he has no ego, first of all, no ego whatsoever. He's like super lax and virtuous and prudent and doesn't want to do anything bad. And he's figuring out all these cool ways to figure out who Kira is. It's actually so scary that while he's joined the task force, he starts to close in on Kira, who's, spoiler alert, him. He starts to close in on Kira real quick. He realizes like how the Death Note works really fast. There's one other thing I wanted to say here. Give me 1 second. All right. So one of the things that Light deduces while he's in his creamy state is he
stop calling it the creamy
I'm
state.
sorry, but creamy light is ridiculous. Do you see the way they drew this man? He looks okay. So you see the picture we have of, if you're on Patreon, you can see the picture that we have up of Yagami Light. He looks evil. Like he just blatantly looks like a bad guy. And the way they draw him when he is in his creamy state is just, he looks way too happy-go-lucky. He looks like every shonen protagonist you've ever seen. He has the really big eyes. His eyes are so small here and like really, really evil looking and pointed. And when they draw him, when he's in his creamy state, I just can't express it enough. Just look at it. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He looks ridiculous. Anyway, while he's in that state though, he realizes that Kira can kill people without using just heart attacks. He can actually manipulate them and kill them in other means besides a heart attack, which is something that L did not know. So he comes into the task force on some crazy, like, I'm already solving things that you guys didn't even put together yet. And L's kind of looking at him like, what the fuck? He doesn't seem like the same person to me anymore. Like I can't quite put my finger on it, but something is off. Like, and this is the supernatural, which sucks, right? Because of course you can't put your finger on it. This motherfucker is a different person, literally. Like you are literally talking and being handcuffed to a completely different person. So on one hand, L's like, yeah, this doesn't seem like the same human being, but I guess nothing changed as far as I can tell. I've literally been handcuffed to this man for God knows how long. And I'm giving him all kinds of tests and he's passing the test and he gives them the cards. And it's funny, L even slips in some note cards that like the Kira did not write. They're just some bullshit. Well, like some of them are just absolutely not his. And he goes through them as creamy light. And he's like, yeah, this is what I get from this. But I think that these are just red herrings at the end of the day, which is exactly what they were. And he doesn't give anything away as Kira. So L just kind of left confused still about the whole thing. But it gets to a point where they hone in on Higuchi. They find him. And the second Light touches the notebook, he gets all his memories back. He uses his watch. And inside of his watch, he has a tiny piece of Death Note paper because even without a full Death Note, if you just have a sheet of paper from it or a piece of the paper and you write somebody's name on it, you can still kill them. It still has all of its powers with just a piece of it, which is absurd. So
he's had this watch on and this piece of paper from the Death Note in his watch for the several fucking months that he didn't have his memory.
Yes. So he's always had the ability to kill people in his watch, just at a time, like, because his Death Note is fully given to Higuchi at the time, and then Misa's is buried in the forest. So when he gets his memories back, the first thing he does is kill Higuchi because he has to tie up that loose end. He can't have him talking about anything, can't have him talking about where he got it from. If they connect that Rem is the person that gave it to him, it'd be like this whole thing where they would realize exactly what's going on. So he kills Higuchi as soon as the FBI and the SBK hone in on him. And while he has his memories back, he has to still play like he's just regular creamy light. So he tells Misa to go to this forest, dig up your notebook. She gets all her memories back, and immediately he gives her the instruction to start killing people again. Now, the reason why this is so crazy is because Misa has just been cleared, and so has Light, of being Kira. And the second that Misa's free, the murders start like immediately, which means that Light has essentially framed her to L. Like he blatantly framed, like she is Kira now. Point blank period. As soon as she's released, the killing start. It's like, okay, it's clearly her. And so L is about to do exactly what Rem feared. He's about to kill her, sentence her to death. And so the second L makes that decision internally in his head, and I guess that Rem knows that her lifespan, he probably saw her lifespan just like cut real far down to like maybe a day or some shit. The second Rem realizes this, she writes L's name in the death note and kills him. And so Yagami Light, using Misa Misa against Rem, and basically using Rem against L, takes out both of his adversaries, because Rem was an adversary in a weird way, and L was blatantly an adversary, so he kills both of them at once. And when he dies, he's holding L's body, and he looks down at him and confirms, he always has to do this. It's the arrogance, but he looks down at him and lets him know that, yeah, you were right. I am Kira. He has this incredibly vicious smirk. I think he's red, and it's the red and blue thing again, but he has this really crazy smirk on his face, like this grin, like I've won. And L has to just like hold that. And as soon as everyone comes into the room and bursts in, like, oh shit, L's dead, he just pretends, he feigns sadness and like, oh, trauma and everything. Like he acts like he's hurt over this. He's like, oh my god, call an ambulance, L's been killed, L's having a heart attack, that type of thing. It's really, really great. That entire plot is really well done. And honestly, the two fake rule thing, I think, is just the craziest shit ever, because there was no way, the only way for L to really disprove it was to do something on the level of Kira. Like you had to become what you once despised. So either burn it and kill yourself, which is wild, right? Like you couldn't do that one. Again, that one was just off the table. But the other option was like, you use it to kill a person and then wait 13 days and you don't die and you realize it's fake. That's like the only way. And once you do that, you're the same as me. So it's just great. It's so good.
Yeah, the whole setup, and it's that culmination of L's death. It's interesting. It's a part of the manga / anime that you get to, and there's so much going into it, and you're on such a high when you get there, and it's like, holy fucking shit, L has died. Like, Light wins, right?
Yeah.
But then, whether or not, you follow weekly anime and you know that, because of the anime schedule that this anime still has fucking 15 episodes left, or if you're reading manga and you know that there's still chapters coming out, there's this crazy thing where it's like Light wins, but the anime's not over, their manga's not over, and you're like, what the hell is going to happen next? And that transitions into what is like essentially known as like part 2 of Death Note.
Yeah, I definitely would say it's blatantly a part 2 at this point. So immediately following L's death, Kira, Yagami Light, becomes L. He takes the same name and he takes over the task force, and he is now the leader of the investigation, which is just a joke at that point, right? Because he is Kira. And he continues to kill people until he doesn't have to, basically, because we find out there's a time skip, and it's a 5-year time skip. And this is why I'm a huge Yagami Light fan, because at the end of the day, not only did he vanquish all of his adversaries, which I'm a big fan of doing, that's why I love Cersei so much when she blew up that church. But I also love the fact that, like, he creates world peace. And people seem to gloss over this fact, like, every time they talk about Yagami Light, and I hate it. Like, this man literally created world peace for 5 years. That entire time skip, there are no wars. Crime is at less than 1%. Like, the world is a different place. Now, yes, I'm not stupid. I understand that is it really peace if people don't have free will? Right? Because you kind of remove choice when you just say, if you kill someone, if you do a crime, you die. And that's true. Like, if you make it where killing people results in you dying, then yes, people don't have as much of a choice. Now, yes, obviously, of course, on the other hand, somebody could also be a hardcore and just argue, yeah, but they still have a choice. Like, people know that they can go to prison, right? So it's just a different consequence. Dying is just a different consequence. But like,
the other thing though is that, like, the people of the world, they don't know Kira, they don't know Light, they're not L. They don't know the rules. They don't really know what crimes they can get away with. Like, if I steal a piece of bubble gum, do I get killed?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily know that Kira is a college student or whatever. They don't know that he's not a real god. So it's like, it creates this weird situation where you truly do feel like you're constantly being watched by a god, and like if I steal this bubble gum, like do I die? Like what
Yeah.
happens?
It's a very sticky situation to be in. And I think it's one of the things that makes Death Note so great. In fact, I actually say that instead of doing part 2 right now, we just make it another podcast episode.
I'm
Like
okay with that.
we're an hour and a half, and I think we cover the entire thing up until L dies, and then like 5 years apiece, and then there's a whole, as you guys know, Near and Mellow come into the scene,
Yeah,
and that's like a
and
whole thing in itself.
yeah, and they get a like. There's a lot of shit that happens.
Yes.
Like what's crazy is that, and Death Note is so dense, and that's something I love about doing the podcast and just hanging out with Fraser and talking about shit. It's so dense, and like we didn't even. There's so much to dive into, even in part 1, that we didn't get to fully dive into, because there's just so much meat in it. Something that's
Yes.
really cool about Death Note and series like this is that you can really dissect all these little micro interactions that the characters have. When you look at like Demon Slayer, which we all like, great animation, but there's only no matter how amazing a fight scene is, there's only so much you can say about it because it's like a
Yeah.
fight, like you're fighting. Like to some degree, like I can only say that like, oh, he did a really cool spin and kicked him in the head so many times. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, like, and I love dope ass fight scenes,
Me
but
too. We went crazy when Demon Slayer got to that episode with
dude,
Daki and all that stuff.
yes, like, but I don't know the denseness of it, the depth
Yeah,
of
the
the amount of
depth of
things that
it.
happen, and things like Death Note are. It's so interesting because like all these little micro conversations, like the tennis scene when they're in the coffee shop talking, when he reveals that he's L, the Lindell, like the detective's fiance, like, and all of the shit in between with like his dad
Yeah, his dad being a big
fights
part of it.
dead
His
and
dad
like
basically fighting against the idea that his son is Kira. And then like Aizawa kind of sort of,
Aizawa and Matsuda, like they play really big roles. Like they start off with not as big roles, but as time goes on, the roles get so much bigger. And like we haven't really talked about them at all.
yeah, there's other people involved who they're risking their lives. There are only 5 people who stayed. And they're risking their lives by even being on this task force because remember, the entire FBI basically got wiped out. And then the rest of the U.S. pulled the FBI out, and then everyone on the task force quit outside of them. So it's like you guys are risking it, and L constantly is condescending to them. In
Yeah,
fact, he even says, like, I don't think that any of you are Kira, and it's basically because he doesn't think they're that smart.
yeah, they're not capable of being Kira. Another cool thing is we talked about this, but the author himself, he's an interesting guy because as far as I know, his real identity isn't known.
I've heard that
Um,
too.
like yeah, people don't like. I'm assuming obviously Shonen Jump knows who he is because they pay him,
Yeah. And
but
someone has to know who his real identity is, but I don't know
but
if
in,
it's yeah.
but yeah, his identity is not public, and he creates this interesting mystique about him because not only is Death Note so interesting, and the one shots are interesting. There's another thing. I don't know if you've ever read it, but before Death Note came out, there's the what do they call it? The I forget the term for it, but I guess it's also basically a one shot. But it's essentially like, for example, before Naruto was a full on manga, there's like a chapter of Naruto that's created that's a concept, and that essentially gets pitched, and we all read that, and then Naruto gets picked up and becomes a whole thing. There's a concept chapter of Death Note where the main character is not Light; it's like a different kid that gets a
Yes.
Death Note. And in this thing, there's this thing called the Death Eraser, where if you erase someone's name, as long as their body is still completely intact, they can come back to life.
Oh, that's wild.
And yeah, and this version of Death Note came out only shortly before the real Death Note came out. But what's so interesting about this is it plays such a different view. The main character of this isn't like Light at all. He's more like a quote unquote good guy where like he gets scared of the Death Note and he tries to give it to the police and all these other things. Um but what's so weird and interesting about it, what I kind of brought this up for, the one shot on its own is worth reading just because it's another piece of Death Note lore, I guess you can watch, even though it's not canon because like the Death Eraser doesn't exist. But it's another look at the series. But then at the end of it, there's like a survey that I think his name's Obata. A survey he puts in it where you could answer and send it in the jump where like if the Death Note was real, what would you do with it? Would you use the Death Note? how would you feel about that? And like, there's like this survey at the end of this little chapter asking people how they would feel about the Death Note being real and what they would do with it. And I don't know, there's just so many interesting aspects to tackle this idea from. And the series itself, the anime manga Death Note, has such an interesting presence on society. And then the one shots that are spanned around it, it makes me very interested in the author himself. And he's just
Yeah, so you are correct. I'm on Wikipedia right now, and his pen name, which is his fake name, is Segumi Oba. And the real identity of him, while people speculate on who it is, because there's another thing that he did, Bakuman or something like that.
yeah. There's an anime / manga called Bakuman that he's done.
Yeah, that like people speculate who he is and who they think he is, but there's no confirmation of who he is, which is so cool to me that there's a guy who wrote
interesting
one of the absolute, and I've known about this since Medina told me about it like a long time ago. I just think it's crazy that in 2022, the actual author of Death Note, one of the biggest and most popular manga and anime series of all time, is unknown. Like,
how about this? It's almost like he's like, just in case the Death Note is real, I don't want them getting me.
Yeah.
like think about how cool it is that like Death Note, the story about like knowing somebody's identity to be able to kill them. The person who wrote it,
his identity is yes. That is
like,
actually so absurd.
You know what I mean? Like how that's just such an interesting thing.
I agree with you. It's still kind of mind blowing to me that again in 2022 we have no idea who this actual human being is, but he's able to churn out some of the most OP shit I've ever read. Like I cannot believe how well written even the one shots are. Like they're so fucking good that again the one that came out during the pandemic, it blew me away. Like it absolutely blew me away, and I want to go over that one at some point as well because I think that there's enough meat there, and then maybe we can like combine that with other one shots because I didn't even know about the well, I knew about the Eraser one, but I didn't really read it or anything. And there's also Death Note movies, and I'm not talking about the fucking Netflix adaptation. No. So don't bring that shit up because we will never be talking about that really, except for when we
unless
do
we're making fun of it.
Unless we talk about like a bad movie type of podcast or something like that, which that's totally a thing, right? But the Death Note movies, I've actually watched some of them, like some of them are live action and everything, and they're kind of cool. There's one where L writes his own name in the Death Note to kind of prove that Light is actually Kira. And because like he can't, so the thing is, we were talking about how he couldn't use it to kill someone else because then he basically just become just like Kira. Like if he uses it to prove that 13-day rule, so he's like, well, fuck it. If you guys won't let me kill a random person, I will just write my own name in it.
Yeah.
Right? And
I forget the exact sequence of the plan, but he basically kills himself to then prove Light is Kira. And so he catches Kira, but he dies in the process.
Yeah, so it like he gets to die and somehow he gets to live past like the 13 days. So he gets to, it's basically the things that he does on his last days of living. Like he knows he's going to die. He's written exactly how he dies because you get to manipulate exactly what you do. So he solves some crimes, and I guess that's kind of like what it focuses on is what he does in his last days alive. So that's a really cool concept. And then you said the concept of the eraser, which is really cool. That would be interesting to just see somebody dead and then come back. That would probably freak me out more than seeing somebody just die. Because like I've never seen somebody come back to life. So like that would just freak me out. Like that would just be so weird.
Like imagine that plot point. Like if the eraser was like, imagine that plot point and then like somehow, some way, like somebody brings back like Ray Penbar's fiance.
Yeah.
And, like, you know what I mean?
Well,
like
brings back fucking L.
Yeah, right.
Like that'd just be OP as hell. So there's a lot of things that can go crazy with that. But yeah, there's a lot of other stories.
Oh, there's also the novel, which I don't think you've read it.
I haven't.
We should at some point. We should definitely like both read the novel and like do an episode on because the novel, it's called like the BB case files. Or
I heard about this. I heard a reference on YouTube.
The novel is very fucking good. Like very good. And it for anybody who doesn't know about the novel, there's an official canon Death Note novel that exists. The novel covers L being a detective on a case. It's the case that he worked with Naomi Misora, Ray Penbar's fiance. During the anime, when blah blah blah, when she's doing, it gets revealed that she has L's respect because she actually worked with L on a case before, and this novel is that case that they worked on together.
Right. That does sound amazing. Definitely need to see that. I am a big fan of just this entire story because what it really does is make you question morality. I think it makes you question like what really is good, what really is evil. If at the end of the day, Light achieved peace for 5 years, right? There were no wars. People are no longer being murdered in the street. People are no longer being raped in alleyways and stuff like that. Crime has dropped so low, the lowest that the world has ever seen it. Is he really wrong for having killed, let's say, 50 to 100 people had to die for that? For like actual world peace. Like, is that wrong? Do the ends justify the means ever? Is there ever a situation where you say, if I kill these 1,000 people, I can save 1,000,000? Right? Like you have to think about that when you analyze Death Note as a whole. And it's not easy. Like, it's not easy to just say, oh yeah, for sure, Light was evil, L was good, and that's just it. Protagonist, antagonist. I think the writer makes it very clear that it's a very gray area.
It's pretty gray, and I think that there's people that get caught up in the fandom that say like Light was definitely right or L was definitely right. Whereas I definitely think like, and I don't even think it's hidden really that the writer wants to be kind of clear that neither one of them are good people.
Yeah.
Like
Like, they're willing
they're
to
just
do
not.
things that are quote unquote not good, to justify, their end game, right? So it's a really, really good story. And I advise you to rewatch it if you've already seen it. And if you've never seen it and you're listening to this, I really think that you should watch it. I don't care how you ingest it. I don't care if you read the manga. I don't care if you
Yeah,
watch it
even if we've
dubbed.
already spoiled things for you for some reason you watched this far and you didn't see it, it's still a million because like
Yeah, we can't
us
possibly do it
talking about
justice.
it,
It just doesn't do
we
it justice.
it and the music, the pacing, and the voice acting, everything that's going to set you up, like you're still going to get so much out of it
Yeah.
watching it.
Like, I do recommend, if I could make a recommendation, if you watch the anime, obviously I want you to watch it subbed, Japanese voice acting with subtitles, English subtitles. That would be peak, because I think that the voice actors just do such an amazing job, the tone and everything. But like, I really don't care how you choose to ingest it. I'd rather you just watch it. Like, if it came to you not watching it or you having to watch it in dub, I just have you watching in dub at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's so good. Like, I literally don't care. Um, yeah, this is just one of my favorites. It is actually my favorite. And I think the only thing that could dethrone it is if Attack on Titan, when it ends in January, we're very close to that now, actually. When Attack on
Oh my
Titan has its
god.
final arc in January, uh,
I
if
didn't
that,
realize we were that close.
yeah, it's actually absurd, right? Attack on Titan's coming to an end real soon. If they stick the ending, like if it actually
Yeah.
lands pretty well, it doesn't do a Game of Thrones and nosedive. If they land the ending of Attack on Titan, it is in contention and in a conversation to be, to me, the best.
Yeah.
Right now
And
is Death Note for me personally, but Attack on Titan could easily take it because everything that's happened in Attack on Titan so far has just been mind blowing. The story has been absurdly well written. I love it so much, and it
yes,
also has a lot of action.
something about Death Note is that and we'll talk about this more when we do the next Note episode, but the ending, I think, at least for me specifically, the manga ending, I think the anime ending's fine, but there's some changes that I don't like as much as in the manga.
Yeah,
But specifically the manga ending, it's one of those things where I think it has like a damn near perfect ending. Like Death Note ends very like
yeah,
for
you're
what the
right, and
entire series is, like it
that's what makes
ends
them good.
very, very well.
The top 10 or so manga and anime in the world, and when you Google like top 10 anime and manga, Death Note, Fullmetal Alchemist, the stuff like that comes up. Berserk, all the popular ones, right? And a lot of them are there because their endings are phenomenal. And Death Note has one of the best endings of anything I've ever read. It just doesn't fail. And when it comes to the ending, it just didn't fail.
It didn't fumble the ball where there's so many things that they're so fucking good all the way through.
And then
I
the
won't say
ending,
what it is, but there's so many things that are so good all the way through, and then you get to the ending and like sometimes it's like not even that the ending's bad. It's just like kind of unsatisfactory. You know what I mean? Like
yes.
it's just not
Yeah, like
all
it
that
might not be
satisfying.
objectively
Like
bad, but it's like that didn't tie up everything the way it needed to.
yeah, yeah. Whereas I think Death Note's ending really just like it ties everything up in a bow, and it has like there's one more amazing like super high tension interaction, and it's like
Yeah,
holy
and
shit.
honestly, it really does feel like the end of a story. I don't feel like after it's over that I have more questions. Like when
Yeah,
Death
I
Note is
agree.
done, when Death Note comes to a conclusion, and we will talk about the conclusion of it on part 2, but when Death Note comes to a conclusion, it's kind of like, all right, well, that was a full story. Like that is the end of a story. And I'm not wondering, well, how did Orochimaru get his arms back? And how did, like, there aren't a bunch of questions at the end. And I think that's what
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
it so good also.
Why
So
did Minato, what the fuck is it? Minato? I'm having trouble saying Naruto's dad's name. Whatever the fuck his dad's name is. Why did he give Naruto the evil half of the Nine Tails? What the fuck was that
yeah,
about?
yeah, that
What
doesn't make
what
any sense.
like whatever. Like when he comes back and it's like he has the good Nine Tails child. It's so fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not the flex you think it is. All right, so I'm going to give a shout out to the people on our Patreon. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting the I'm There podcast. For those who do not know, we have an I'm There podcast Patreon account. So if you go to patreon.com and look up I'm There podcast, you can find it. And we offer exclusive content, access to our Discord server, and other exclusive perks that you can only get by being sub to us on Patreon. There's also full video length versions of the podcast. If you actually are one of those people, I'm subscribed to other Patreons where I literally subscribed because I wanted to see the people who are speaking and like when they're laughing and stuff like that. I don't know. It just does something for me. It makes it more immersive. So there's a Patreon that I'm subscribed to. It's only like what, $10 a month, but I literally have subscribed to it because I really enjoy when it's a comedy podcast at that. So it's like for me, physical comedy is so big and they do things that are very physical. So what they do is on YouTube, they show the first 10 minutes of every episode. Like you get to see the first 10 minutes and you get to see the visuals for it. But then a curtain literally comes down on YouTube and you can't see them anymore, but you can still hear them. So you get the full audio of the podcast, but you never actually get to see the people after 10 minutes. And after seeing them for 10 minutes at the beginning of every episode, I was like, damn, I really, really want to sub and just see them the whole time because they say such funny shit. And them laughing and seeing them laugh and like how they move and operate, it makes me laugh and it just brings joy to me. So I say all to say, you can see the video versions of our podcast by going to our Patreon. Without further ado, though, let me give a shout out to Connie, Austin, Leon, Quest, Garrett, Xavier, Hylian, TCG Automotive, Silver Chronic, Tyree Tinsley, Dimitri Barnes, Alexander Brissett, Vinny Casello, Giovanni Avelos, Alex Flamer, Henri Reynolds, CJ, WK-1, Saul at Dabber's Gaming Cafe, Dennis Milburn, Joseph Marcello, Red Vines, First to Home, Delos Ferneris, Estada Akuma, Mitchell Nels, Midwest Gaming, William Shapiro, Dimitri Safirdas, Vince Marquette, Dallas Bailey, KJ, Biz, Roz Weiss, Nick Stango, Scott Polera, our two-time and the only two-time national champion, Hansel Aguero, and our newest Vincent Zen, who's written in many listener letters to the I'm There podcast. He's our newest patron. Thank you so much, Vincent, for subscribing. And he's at the $10 tier, so he unlocked all the exclusive episodes and the video versions of the podcast. So shout out to Vincent. We actually love your listener letters. He's the guy who, in the last episode, he asked us a question about, is it toxic to have like an obsession with somebody that makes you forget what your life was like beforehand? Basically, if you're in a relationship with someone and you start to like lose who you were, that was his listener letter. So a lot of people actually reached out to me and told me how they felt about that. And they were like, yo, I relate to that so much. Like that has actually happened to me. That's happened to my group of friends. I agree with what you were saying. So, I was just going off of how I felt because obviously I took that shit very personal and I took that personal. So I was speaking on my own. Like I actually completely got consumed by my own personal experiences, but apparently a lot of people can relate to that. And that makes me feel good knowing that like I wasn't just off the wall spouting nonsense, I guess. If even a couple people can relate to it, it's worth talking about. So yeah, if you guys also want to write in listener letters and I'm There podcast, just send them to imtherepodcast@gmail.com and we will read it aloud on the show. And yeah, I think that's pretty much this episode on Death Note, part 1. And we're going to do part 2. At first, I actually have notes for all of part 2 as well, and I was going to go into it, but as I'm looking at how long this is, I'm like, man, we're at an hour and a half. We can definitely break this up into 2 and do justice for it, because I do want to talk about a lot of the concepts of Death Note 2 when we get to part 2. Like, we did a lot of recap, which we kind of said we wouldn't, but we still did a lot of recap. And I think it's fine because we also did talk about concepts while we were doing the recap. But part 2 is going to be obviously recap on the conclusion of it, part 2 and everything with Mello and Nier. And then just thoughts about like what Death Note meant to me when I was younger and like how I think about it now still. And then the one shots and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right, guys. Well, as I always say, do the things that make you happy. including writing the name down.
No.
Okay, my bad.
Unless it means going on a Death Note killing spree.
Okay, my bad. Good night.
Peace.